Welcome everyone to part 2 of our 4-part series for IT service providers for Authonet products. This part is to describe for IT service providers how to install and configure the Authonet Zero Trust Network Access Gateway. Now, there is an initial product configuration that can be followed on the quick start guide. Each product has is accompanied by a quick start guide. And so that shows how to connect the equipment and how to go through the initial setup. The products are configured as shown in the diagram. This is the Authonet A300. The ports are connected as shown. The WAN port is the connection to the local area network. The LAN 4 is dedicated for the admin console, and LAN 1, 2, and 3 for the user equipments. LAN 4 must be used for the admin configuration. The Authonet A1000 is shown in the diagram, very similar. Once again, the admin must connect to the LAN 4 port. Now, when the unit is powered up and the equipment, the computer is connected to LAN 4, then it's going to open the screen that is shown in the browser. This is the introductory screen. You can see that there is very little information to configure. Set the time zone and set the password. Click the wand figure in order to generate a secure password that follows the rules. If this page doesn't show, just type ulogin.com into the browser in order to see this page. Now, once the initial password has been set for the administrator, then the dashboard is going to be displayed. This shows the dashboard. Basically, it's got the menu on the left-hand side. It's got 4 colored bars to have quick access to reports. The serial number is shown, and this is always required if you're going to open a support ticket. And then graphs show the WAN transmit and receive data throughput. Now, the user will see a login page eventually when users have been configured. Initially, no devices are configured, no users are configured. A browser will show no connection, although the computer will get an IP address from the DHCP service in the business network. In order for the user to see a login page, the administrator must add devices and add users. Now, when the administrator logs in, the menu is shown on the left-hand side of the page, and that's divided into 3 sections. The first is the status, the second is management, and the third is settings. The status displays activity information that is relevant to the use of the device. It shows logs, and it shows a series of reports that are available. The management is the configuration of devices, users, and rules that are going to be imposed on those devices and users. Next, we have the settings, and this is a series of configurations which we need to set up the system. Alerts, login, network, time zone, upgrade, backup, staff, reboot, and logout. And we'll see each of these in turn in the following sections. When the administrator connects the computer to the LAN 4 port, the login page isn't shown. The administrator will see a login box. and will require the entry of the username and password that was set for the administrator. If this box doesn't show, type in newlogin.net/admin. And the password is the one that was entered in the initial setup. Now, the administrator does not have access to the internet. However, this can be configured following a simple procedure. If we open the activity page, look for the administrator's computer, then we can click on the three horizontal bars to the right of the IP address. This opens a window as shown, and so we click the button login as admin, and that will give the administrator access to the internet. Now, this is a risk because if the administrator's computer has access to the internet, then there's a risk that the administrator might click on a phishing link, install a virus, and so the remote criminal has access to the administrator's computer. So use this procedure with caution. Now, the status and reporting can be accessed via the dashboard. There are 4 colored blocks which give fast access to information about the system. Top left, we have authenticated devices and connected devices. And the figure shows that clicking the question mark symbol displays additional information. The next, top right, shows logins today and logins this week. And once again, clicking the question mark will display additional information. The colored block bottom left shows new devices and blocked devices. So all devices that are connected to the network are listed there, and also devices which have been blocked from the network are listed. And the last 10,000 events are displayed. The colored block on the bottom right shows the blocked logins and failed logins. And this is information that is important if we're going to monitor unauthorized attempts to access the network. We have performance charts, which show the CPU and RAM usage of the unit, and also the WAN throughput, which is the data flow between the users and the business network. The network activity is divided into 2 groups: the authenticated LAN devices and all LAN devices. All LAN devices are any device connected to the network, irrespective of whether it's an authorized device or an authenticated device. We can look at the authenticated LAN device status, click on the gear symbol, and we have the options in the box that opens to log out the device or block that device. This is action we may take if we identify that device as having a potential risk to the network. We can look at all LAN device status, click on the figure in order to be able to block access, add to devices, or log in as admin. And we'll see later that we're going to use this feature when we add devices to our device list. If we click on add to the device list, we'll see that the device, which is at that point unidentified, is added to the bottom of the device list. We can give it a name, and then we can click on the button to update the device list. The next screen shows the log. Now, this is a log of events, which we define when we create rules. We maybe identify a rule that requires a log in case there's an attempted breach of that rule. And so we can list all the logged events in this report, and we keep the last 10,000 records. We have the reports page, which shows events that were selected for logging and reporting when a rule was created. And we understand that an attempt to break a rule might indicate an attempted intrusion. For example, if a computer has a Trojan virus installed and the remote criminal is trying to access servers which might be blocked, will indicate that that particular device is a potential risk to the network. Let's go through the configuration steps for the Authonet Zero Trust Network access. First of all, we want to configure the email alerts. This is a drop-down menu where initially the alerts are disabled, but we want to enable those. We're going to add the email address that we're going to send the alerts to, and then we're going to choose what type of alert. We have two checkboxes. One is an alert that is sent out when unknown devices connect to the network. This is a device with a MAC address that we don't recognize. And so we want to follow up and understand what is connected to the network. The second alert is repeated authentication failures. And so if some user is adding a password, but for example, the password is correct, but the one-time password for two-factor authentication is not correct, that might indicate that a password has been stolen and a criminal is trying to access the network. Now, the login page can be customized. At this point, no one can see the login page because devices and users have not been configured, but we can set up the configuration. And so we can brand the login page and make it more user-friendly. We have a number of options there. When we look at the configuration of the login page, we can set the inactivity logout time. This is a number of minutes after which we're going to log out a user if there's no activity. We're going to set the number of failed logins that we'll accept before we send an alert and block access for a period of time, and we're specifying the time in minutes that we're going to block access. And then we have an option to enable or disable the login page. Normally this would be enabled. We can put a message on the login page. We can add a company logo, set a background image, and if we want, we can enable a login page for the administrator, although this is not recommended. Now, the message, we might decide to put there the contact information for the administrator. So that if some user is having a difficulty logging in, then there's a phone number there to call the administrator to clarify the problem. Here are two examples of a customized login page. You can see the login page has a background image plus a logo that was uploaded to the login page. The background image, for example, can be created to have the company logo and also have written information that is required for use of the network. And so it's a very flexible login system. Now, the network configuration has two choices: use DHCP or set static IP addresses. The Authonet gateway is a bridge. And so when a device connects to the LAN network and sends a request for an IP address, that's forwarded to the DHCP server in the business network. Obviously, the device must have the same IP address range as the business servers in order to be able to connect to them. There is an alternative, however. If a network has been configured with static IP addresses, we can select this option. And in this case, any DHCP request is not forwarded. We also need to verify that the time zone is correct, and this must coincide with the time zone on mobile phones. And the reason is that the mobile phone will be used for two-factor authentication. And so the app that's used for two-factor authentication will pick up the time from the phone. And for the two-factor authentication to function, the Authonet gateway must have the same time zone setting as the phone. We have an option here to upgrade firmware. When we select this item in the menu, then the available firmware will be shown and the current firmware is indicated. And if the available version is a newer version, then we just need to click on upgrade the firmware. We can alternatively download a firmware and upload it manually. There's a warning here that after we've clicked upgrade the firmware, we must not disconnect the power until we get the message that the upgrade is complete. If the power is disconnected, then the unit will be damaged. We have an option for our backup settings. It's essential that after a gateway has been configured, we create a backup of all the settings. Now, we've got the option of creating a backup with all the settings, but then we can create a backup with rules, devices, and users, and store these independently. If we need, we can recover the settings using the restore feature. This page also provides us with a feature to reset the unit to factory defaults if we need to do that. Now, we've already registered the first administrator in the initial setup process. We can add more administrators and we can add staff to the list. And so we'll do that on this page, staff management. Now, an administrator has full access to all the configuration parameters. And so we would probably have a couple of administrators, and these might even be the IT service provider who is qualified as the administrator. Staff do not have access to all the administration functions. However, they can manage activity, log devices and users in or out, manage devices, add or remove rules from devices, and manage users, add or remove rules and change passwords for users. The administrator can add users, add rules, basically any type of configuration that's necessary. When an administrator or a member of staff is added, a password must be generated. Remember that this login is only on the LAN4 port. So if the red lock is showing, click on the red lock to create a password and select the type of login, either staff or admin. The staff role is designed for businesses who require someone to be able to log into the system and make simple changes, but without making overall changes to the system. The admin will be used by maybe an IT service company to make broader changes to the system. And remember that LAN4 must be used for login for admin or staff. LAN4 must not be connected to the local area network. This is a port exclusively for the administrator. If this is connected to the local area network, then that is a serious security risk. And so, as a reminder, the primary administrator is added during the setup. Other administrators and staff, when added, have a password that's generated for them to log into LAN 4. And we just click the plus sign to add more administrators or staff. The last two entries in the settings menu are the reboot and logout. Very straightforward. Reboot will reboot the Authonet gateway. Logout will log out the administrator or the staff member. Now, this is the most important section of the configuration, the configuration of devices, users, and rules. Remember that the authentication process is a sequence of steps. When a device is connected, first of all, we check if that device is in our allowed list. If it's not, then the access is blocked. If it is in our allowed list, then we check the rules to identify if a user is associated with that device. And if so, then we display the captive portal for the user, request the user's credential, and then if that user is configured for two-factor authentication, we request the one-time password. Once the authentication process has been completed, then the connections are passed to the firewall, and so the access rules are applied. Access rules for the local area network access and access rules for the internet access. If any error in that process occurs, then it's added to the status and error report, and if necessary, an alert is sent out to the administrator. Now, we have prioritization for authentication. There are two types of authentication, as a device or as a user. And a device can be connected to the network and authenticated, which gives the device access to the local area network and also to the internet. And so a device such as an Internet of Things, which might be a production machinery controller, can be configured without a user. We can allow access or block access. And if we allow access, then we're going to maybe set rules. Maybe a rule that says that the device can't access the local area network, and a rule that says the device can only access a certain IP address on the internet. If a device has a user, then that device will be configured for login, and then we add the user that will be using that device. This diagram shows the decision process for rules. We first match a user or device. We look for a default rule, and then we match a user or device policy, and then look for a default policy. If we fail in those 4 steps, then we block the device. If we pass in any one of those steps, then we carry out the subsequent actions, which might be block, allow, or login. Now, until the Authonet gateway is being configured, no devices or users can access the network. And so it's necessary to go through the configuration process. We first add devices, then we add users, and then we set the rules for the devices and users. Now, devices and users have 3 basic access configurations: full access, blocked access, or login access. And in the case of full access or login access, we also add rules to determine what can be accessed and what cannot be accessed. We have two approaches to set the rules. We can allow access to everything, but then specify what is going to be blocked, or we can block everything and specify what is going to be allowed. And the decision is made based on the type of rule that we want to impose. If, for example, we have a server in the network and we want to allow access to the network but block access to that server, then we would specify a rule that blocks access but allows that server IP address. If, for example, we have a situation where we want to allow access to specific ranges of IP addresses, then we can specify the allow. However, we specify the range of IP addresses that we want to allow access. Now, the device configuration is done by selecting the devices in the menu. And you can see that we have the MAC address of the device, a description of the device, and then we have a drop-down menu to allow, block, or login. And we also have a default policy, which we'll select. Right now, the rules are not shown because we haven't enabled rules. The user menu is shown. We have a username, which is going to be used for the authentication process, the full name of the user, and then we have three buttons which allow us to generate the password for the user, generate a one-time password, and then print a welcome page. And we also have a box to allow or block that user. Once again, the rules option is not shown because the rules have not yet been enabled. Now, this page shows the network rules. You'll see the box on the left shows the page as you would see it when first configured. We have to click on the box to allow the entry of rules. And once we've done that, then you can see that we have four parameters for the rules. First is the name, which we'll use when we're adding the rule to the devices or users. We have the type of rule, where we can block, allow, or log in. We have the alert, where we can have none or log. And then we have the rule, which can be an IP address or a range of IP addresses, or it can be a domain name for the internet. Now, let's start with device management. We go back to our device configuration page, and we can see that we're adding MAC addresses. We're giving names to those devices. If it's an Internet of Things, it might be production controller number 5. If it's a laptop, it might be the name of the person who's going to use that laptop. And then we choose a policy, which can be login, allow, or block. If we choose allow, then that person has free access to the network and the internet, unless, of course, rules are imposed subsequently to determine what can be accessed and what is blocked. The login is the most appropriate policy selector for each device, because that means we're going to add a user, and so we're going to create a login credential for that user. If we decide to block a device, we may do that because we suspect that that device might be a risk to the network. Now, an easy way to add MAC addresses to the device table is to go to the All LAN devices list. We can click on the figure shown, and that opens a box, which is block device, add to devices, or log in as admin. And in this case, we would click the box to add to devices. The device would then be added to the devices table, and we can then give it a name and click on update devices. Once we've activated the rules, you'll see that there's a new box for each device, the rule box. And so we're going to be able to set rules for that device as well. And you can see there's also a default rule which applies to all devices in that list. Now, the default policy can be allow, block, or login. And the rule will elaborate in order to determine what will be applied to all devices. User management is very similar. We add users to the list. We give each user a username, which will be used as part of the login credential. We add the full name of the user. And then to the right, we have three buttons. The first is to set a password, and we must set a password. That's compulsory. The one-time password for two-factor authentication is optional. If it's not set, it's shown in red. If it's set, it's shown in black. And then we have a button which allows us to print a welcome page for the user. To the right of that, we have a button where we can allow or block that user. And so this shows the buttons that we click when a user has been added. We generate a password for that user using the lock symbol. That opens a box here, and we would generate an automatic password using the wand. And we have the option to allow the user to change the password and also allow the user to change the one-time password for two-factor authentication. Then we would generate the code for two-factor authentication by clicking on the button. And that would open a box with the QR code that would be used to configure our application on our phone for the two-factor authentication, which might be free OTP, for example. Next, we want to click on the button to print out the credentials for the user. On the left, some of the OTP apps are shown. There are apps from Google, Microsoft, then LastPass, OTP Authenticator, 2FA Authenticator, Aegis Authenticator. When we click the button to print the credential, then we open a box which shows the password and the OTP code. And there's a special note there that the administrator, when giving this information to the user, must not let the user remove the page. This is a security risk. The user must set the one-time password on the phone, must make a note of the username and password, but must return the paper to the administrator for shredding. It's a risk if the user takes this paper, scans it, and then stores it on the computer. That gives free information to any potential hacker. When the welcome page is printed, this is how it looks. We have the name of the user, the login page, the username and the password, and we have the QR code. Now, what happens is that the user opens the app on the phone, which might be free OTP, scans the code, and that initializes the app with the key for that user. Each time the user then opens the app subsequently, a code is generated, which is entered for the one-time password configuration, the two-factor authentication. Next, let's look at rules management. This is probably the slightly more complicated part of the process because rules might take a little time to understand exactly how to prepare them. Initially, as I pointed out, we'll see a box there where we click to show the rules page. And once we see the rules page, then we can enter the rules. So we're going to give the rule a name because that name is going to be used to add the rule to the devices or the users. We're going to identify whether that rule is going to be a block, allow, or login. And you can see those are color coded. Block is red, allow is green, and login is yellow. We're going to decide if that code, that rule is going to generate an alert. And we can have none or log, and we can then log an alert if there's an attempted breach of rule. And finally, we add the rule itself. This might be an IP address in the local network, or it might be an IP address in the public network, or a domain name in the public network. We add rules using the plus symbol, and there is no limit to the number of rules we can add. Each rule is given a unique name because we're going to use those names to add the rules to the devices and user lists. And so when we add a rule, we open a box and we see that we can add the IP or host name for that rule. We then add the CIDR, which is a number which represents the size of the IP block, which can be, for example, /28. And so that specifies the net mask. And so what we're doing there is specifying a range of IP addresses, which might be appropriate for a number of servers in our network that we want to block access to. We also have a port number there. There's a default of port 80 for HTTP access. And then we have a protocol type, which can be TCP/IP or UDP. And we keep adding more rules by clicking the plus symbol. Now, once we've created the rules, we can proceed to add those rules to devices. Remember that the type of rule is selected, allow, block, or login, and the alert is selected, either none or log. Let's first add the rules to the device list. And so once we've enabled the rules, the boxes are shown to enter the rules. And so we have an overall policy for a device, block, allow, or login, which can be modified by the rules. So when we click on a rule box, then it opens a small menu, and we see that we have a drop-down menu listing all the rules. And so we select one of those rules, and we can click on the plus sign to add another rule. And so there's no limit to the number of rules. We can add all the rules in our rule list if we want to do that. And so we would click on the rule that we want to select, and that will be added to the rule box. Now, it's important to note that rule order matters. If we add several rules to the rule box, then the rule that will be applied last is the rule on the right, which means if two rules are created with conflicting information, then the rule to be applied is the last one on the list or the rule on the right. And we can also add rules to our default rule box in the same manner. We click on the default rule, and then we select the rules from the drop-down list. This shows clicking on the default rule box, and we can actually change the order of the rules if we want to do that. And so if we find that we have conflicting rules and we want to ensure that the rule that we want is applied, then we can change the order in the list of these rules to make them at the top of the list or at the bottom of the list. Remember, the rules at the bottom of the list are the ones that will be applied last. And so at any time, we can add new rules, and we can apply those rules to devices, to users, either to individual devices or users, or to all our devices or users. So let's add rules now to the user list. You'll see that the rules box is now available because we've enabled rules. And so if we click on the rules box, then we'll be able to add rules. We open a window. Once again, we select the rules from the drop-down box in order to add them to the rules window. Here's an example of rules which illustrate how we would create the rules. And as you can see, the rules are very flexible. So rule 1, allow access to the internet, but block access to Google. Okay, so we give this a name, in this case, Google, it's arbitrary. We select block. We're not going to log this. And then we type the domain name google.com. And so if we then add this to our device list or our user list, we add the name Google, and then in the default policy, it's allow unless blocked. And so that would be a default rule setting. And so what that means is the internet access is allowed except blocked as specified by that rule. Now, rule 2 will block access to the LAN, but allow access to 2 servers. And so in this case, we're going to call the rule servers, an arbitrary name. We're going to set the type to allow. We're not going to set an alert. And then we're going to add the 2 IP addresses for the 2 servers that we want to access. And so when we add this to the default rules, we add the server name, and then the default policy is going to be block unless allowed, and the rule will allow access to those servers. Here's some more examples. Rule 3, we're going to allow access to the LAN, but block a list of servers. Now, this is a little bit more complicated because in this case, we're going to need to create 4 rules to block access to all the servers. And so this is illustrated in the diagram. We're going to allow access to a range of IP addresses, but then we're going to specify the servers that we're going to block. And so it's always a good thing when a network is being configured to add the servers in one block of IPs. So it might be desirable to, when setting up the DHCP server, to restrict the range of DHCP IPs and then allocate a block of static IPs to servers, which makes it easy to configure and allow or block of those servers. And so you can see in our example here, when we configure a default rule, we're going to actually add 4 rules to that. And so we're going to specify that as block unless allowed. Finally, rule 4, we're going to block access to the internet, but we're going to allow access to a public cloud server. And so that shows that we're going to give it the rule the name cloud. We're going to allow access. We're not going to set the alerts. and we're going to set the public IP address of that server. Now, this is the type of rule that we would use if we were going to block phishing, because if you remember from some of our other presentations, one method of blocking a phishing attack is to allow access only to those internet servers and devices that we want staff to use, and block access to everything else. So if somebody clicks on a phishing link, then that link cannot access the criminal server in order to install the Trojan virus. And so we would set up a series of rules like this for the internet websites or servers that we want to access. We can use the public IPs, or we can use the domain names. And then in our default rules, we put the names of those individual rules. And then we put the default policy to block unless allowed. And so what that does is allow our users to access the websites that we determine, and everything else on the internet is blocked. And so effectively, we block phishing attacks and many other types of virus attacks that might occur. Finally, further information about Authonet Zero Trust Network Access products. You can download the manual at this link shown at the top of the page. We have product data sheets. We have introductory videos for business owners, and we have training videos for IT service providers. We also have our free online support. And remember, when making a support request, do provide the serial number of the device. Finally, if you have any questions, you can contact us at the email address shown. You can also contact us via the support page, and do follow us on our Authonet Cybersecurity social media channels: LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Well, thank you very much for watching this presentation. That's all for now. Do look out for part 3 in this series of a 4-part series. Okay, and if you have any questions, please contact us. We'll be very happy to help you.